Welcome to the latest edition of Weather or Not. I'm meteorologist Brian Karstens. All right, well, we made it to the start of the weekend. Our Friday program today, we're going to be featuring a few things. Of course, we're going to get into the Pheasant opener. That's always a big story. Whenever we cover weather in mid-October, we get into the pheasant forecast, and we're going to visit about that here in this first segment. First thing up for business, wanted to kind of recap where we are as we get into the weekend. We've had a frontal system move through. Boy, a lot of rain last night west of Sioux Falls. And the original thinking on this, if you recall, it was a couple of segments that would develop parallel to that front. And then remember how we talked about it would weaken as it moved to the east. And that's exactly what you witness on that radar and that satellite display. A little bit of a wraparound. If you really even want to be technical about it, there's two systems there, a couple of circulations into western South Dakota. And so the rainfall totals have been a little more impressive off to the northwestern corner of South Dakota. We've been mentioning that. I know Buffalo had about almost an inch of rain. Isn't this an interesting map? This is the 24-hour rainfall total map. And look at the dark green just east of Mitchell. And we were talking Alexandria, Salem, Madison, Howard, Brookings, just kind of on the edge. And if you're in that strip of green, your rain gauge is a lot different than most of the rest of us. I know I live near Canton, so see that? There's hardly anything there. And that was also true up toward Pipestone and Laverne. A little more rain east of Laverne out of this system. So kind of, an interesting way to end the week there with some rain. Okay, as promised, let's get into a little bit of this pheasant forecast. And just a little friendly reminder, if you are going to be out this weekend, remember our KELOLAND Storm Tracker app is free to download. It has wonderful tools that track wind, temperatures, all the conditions you need to know about. A couple of key points here on this graphic. This is a sample forecast for Redfield, South Dakota. We put a couple of these on air this morning. Again, you want your spot where you're going, where you're going to be out and about. Make sure you get that Storm Tracker app. But the main takeaway is 50s tomorrow. We do pick up the wind. It's going to come in. It's not over the top. It's been worse. It's not going to be the 40 plus or anything like that. But I think 20 to 30 gusts in the 30-mile-an-hour range looks pretty likely. Okay, so that's where we're going to be at. And we do want to hit that rain chance with this frontal system. And in fact, that's going to be a notable interest in our forecast. And we're going to get into that, of course, coming up. And in addition to that, as we cover the weather this weekend, we'll see how Sunday's going to lay out also next week. And I'll give you a clue. If you love autumn weather, you're going to really like next week. I think we've got some awesome conditions coming up. My kind of weather, we'll say. All right, that's our first segment. We're just getting started. You're watching Weather or Not, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the program. We're going to dig into more of the forecast now, as promised. And, as we go through these elements, remember, of course, Futurecast. This is the latest timing of the particulars of the weather going into the weekend. I always like to advertise that as we get closer, we can start to pinpoint a few more things. We've been talking all week about a chance of some showers on Saturday. We've been talking about wind. And as I mentioned from the get-go, the biggest issue, or the at least the one in my opinion, has been the timing of all of this. So as we sort out the day part today, temperatures in the 60s. We started the morning in the 60s in Sioux Falls, so it's been pretty easy to maintain well above normal temperatures. And I always remind you, too, that normal highs now are getting down into the low 60s, even some upper 50s in portions of South Dakota. So a day like today, we're above normal. Tonight looks good. We've got football and other things on our agendas tonight. Looks like the weather forecast should be quiet. But let's point out what's going on in northwestern South Dakota. See those showers popping up. This is our upper air disturbance. Couple of characteristics about this. Number one, it's being driven by some mid-level jet stream energy. So when we look at systems like this from the northwest, I don't get too excited about big, heavy rain. That's just not the case. It's showers, scattered showers. And it's going to be moving along because at the surface, the wind is already out of the northwest in Sioux Falls to start the day. It's just going to pick up once this reinforcing shot comes out of the northwest. So the timeline on the rain would kind of be around Pier, daybreak. So we get into the late morning. I know, that's important, isn't it, for the Pheasant opener? And we're talking James Valley probably by 10. That seems to be a pretty reasonable estimate. And so assuming that continues, we hit Sioux Falls a little bit better on that scattered rain chance toward midday, early afternoon. Behind that line, see, things are drying out, aren't they, west of Sioux Falls. So the afternoon, when you factor in some wind, it's really not going to stay damp for very long. I don't see that being the case. I think the winds are sustained 20 to 30. We're going to pick up some wind gusts a little stronger. So if you really wanted to pinpoint one variable that's probably the biggest one, it is some wind tomorrow. So we'll play that into consideration. And temperatures in the 50s. So that, again, very reasonable. That's where we should be now for this time of the year. How about Sunday morning? Another little pause point here. We get into some 30s on Sunday morning. Now, as of right now for Sioux Falls, we're not forecasting a frost. I think it could get a little colder, though, than 39, just as a little heads up there. So I don't want you to forget about that this weekend. My tomatoes, they're still growing. Not that we're doing a lot with them now. They've got a lot of green ones, but some peppers, and I'm kind of like, well, I want to probably keep a few of those going. Some of you are probably well past that by now. And, of course, western South Dakota, we've already had frost and freeze weather. So just a little reminder, though, there'll be some 30s out there Sunday morning. Sunday afternoon looks great. We're going to finish up this weekend. Awesome weather, 60s, some 70s in Rapid City. And then the next thing to watch will be a disturbance coming in on Monday. Could provide us with a few showers, but more importantly, some wind will pick up. Monday afternoon, probably Monday evening too here. That could be quite a windy forecast. Speaking of wind, let's pick this apart a little bit. So a couple things. We've got today's forecast in view first. Northern half of South Dakota picks up winds of 15 to 30. That's what we're finishing up today with that type of weather. Tomorrow morning, there's a northwest breeze. See how that goes from Rapid City all the way into southwest Minnesota. But it's the strength of the wind that is anticipated to forecast, at least in our forecast, to go up during the course of the afternoon. So there are the numbers, and a lot of the wind gusts are above 30. That makes a lot of sense, given the mixing and the drying environment behind some of those morning showers. So take that. Consider that as it affects your plans. We'll go into Sunday. We'll turn the wind around more to the south or southwest. It should warm up a little bit better, too. So we'll warm back in the 60s. But then we turn the corner. See that Monday story I just talked about? Watch this. We're going to go to the next frame on this slide, and that's late afternoon. And we get some 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts on the potential for Rapid City, Mobridge, and Pier. And that's all driven by a pretty potent low-pressure system up near Devil's Lake, North Dakota. And sure, it'll drag in some cooler weather going into Tuesday, but remarkable. I've said it several times. I believe that the resilience of the mild weather in this pattern is a big, big deal. And that's one reason why we're going to finish up the month of October with a lot more days actually at or above average for this time of the year. So that's this segment. We're not done. We've got more to talk about. We're going to dig into next week and maybe a few clues about the end of the month. That could be interesting. Stay with us. You're watching Whether or Not. Welcome back to the program. All right, time now to talk a little bit about the long-range picture. We'll get into next week and some of the items that we think are important to watch in the world of weather. So we start things off with the everlasting, it seems like anyway, the above normal temperatures draped here in the midsection of the country. You can see that the trend, though, is to relax that a little bit. It's going to back off. So we lose some of the deep reds. In fact, if you really want to look carefully at this, there's actually a little period of some cooler weather by that Tuesday time frame. We've got some highs projected in the 50s, and we'll see if any clouds or rain showers accompany that. So the weather map across the country, too, it looks, a little more seasonable here for the 20th going into the 21st of October. But the resilience of that warmth, here we go again. Watch down in Texas. See that? Okay, so some mid-level ridging is going to connect here as we end next week. And we are going to go above normal again. The question really is, how much above normal can we get? And some of that will hinge on the development of low pressure to our west. Do you remember the conversation about those lows and how they have been tracked by Mr. Mundt about his fog? Well, he kind of talked yesterday about that, the fog forecast and some of the cyclical patterns with everything going on the last 45 days. And watch what happens to this map. It turns blue across the Rockies. So there's definitely some more active weather that's going to come in, and then we'll get to see where that goes. But that's the system. That's part of that low pressure area that should arrive by around the 29th of October. And then we'll see if it stalls as we get toward the very end of the month. It all depends on where it goes. That's a big, that's up for debate. We don't know yet where that's going to be. Now, we're saying goodbye to this first system. There it goes into North Dakota and southern Canada and the rain that fell with that. So let's put this graphic into motion. You can see that low sits up there this weekend. That's a little piece that rotates around that. That's that shower chance tomorrow. You can see the drapery of that green color there in South Dakota tomorrow afternoon. And then we clear the decks on that into Sunday before the next ripple comes in from the northwest on Monday. And you see that bit of precipitation to our northwest. That's going to come out in little pieces there on Monday. Northwest flow, not known for big rain, but could we add a little rain to our forecast? We have that going right now for Aberdeen, even for Rapid City. I think that there are some chances in there. We may have to pop in a few more showers, but mostly the big story is the wind. When you get those tightly packed isobars. Now, this is not an isobar map. This is a little different than that, but it kind of gives you the same story there. The depth of that low pressure center in the mid layers of the atmosphere is pretty good. So that's going to zip along into the Great Lakes going into Tuesday. Now, there's our nice weather. There it is. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week. That is such beautiful weather. I think you're going to think to yourself, we're really in for a nice treat of autumn conditions in that whole time period. Then we'll just wait and see how that low behaves out there on the West Coast. And there it is. You're going to see this from time to time. This is going to probably be a little back and forth on how to handle all this, but there is a swath of rain there, and that's out to the 27th of October. So, it's a little ways out. It's definitely beyond the range of our 7-day forecast, but I do think that it is prudent to watch that because there's evidence now pretty good in the modeling, and it jives very well with Scott's window of time for some sort of a cutoff low, and it's not a lot different than yesterday, except for its position. It's shifted a little bit farther south. That's obviously up for debate at this point, but there's a pretty decent fetch of moisture with that feature. So whoever gets that at the end of October could get quite a wet spell. So if it moves north, that would be a bigger deal for us and could affect some of the harvesting activities. Certainly something like that would be a bigger deal for Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, as we wrap up the month of October. But a little bit, and somebody asked me today about this too, if this would be a snowmaker. My quick answer to that, no, I don't think so. That's too far south. We don't have any Arctic connection to that whatsoever, so don't worry about that. That's, at least in my opinion right now, if it changes, we'll let you know. But at this point in time, I'm not worried about that. I think the rain, though, could be a pretty significant factor in there, too. That could be a rainmaker in Kansas, Nebraska, whoever gets underneath something like that. 2 inches of rain possibilities. So we'll keep an eye on it if it floats into our region. All right, coming up next, we've got a few more maps to get to, including Mr. Mundt's segment. He always likes to talk about snow. Yep, we'll do that next. Stay with us. Welcome back. Okay, time to look at some other interesting things in the world of weather as we kind of pan and look out into the future a little bit. Always kind of fun to do that. Okay, so here we go. This is, first of all, a couple of notes about this particular graphic here. This is the AI version of the European model, so we're looking at a different perspective here. Temperature trends. So dark red and anything in charcoal, that's way above normal. Your temperature anomalies, you can see the blues and the green colors are where we're below average. So we've got New England, we've got the Four Corners. That's how the forecast begins, okay? So let's march through this. Now, this takes us into early next week, like we just talked about. We've got that push of some cooler weather into Tuesday. The AI version agrees with that. Then, oh, did you see that there too? That's Wednesday morning. Interesting to see that. Let me pause for a minute here. We're going to do this since we're just going to kind of run through some numbers here. Look at that. The AI, I know that's a little hard to see, isn't it? Let me see if I can zoom in. I don't know if I've got all the zooming capability on this graphic. This one's a little better. Okay, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, right there. If you can't read that number, that's a morning low of 30. So what does that mean? Well, obviously means that some frost could be in the offing here. I mentioned a little bit ago, my garden is still humming along. It's been down to about almost freezing a couple of different times. But yeah, could we end the growing season? It's possible. It just takes just a little bit cooler. You know, we've been close a couple of different times. I think the coldest low in Sioux Falls, if I'm not mistaken, is 34 for the season. So anyway, we'll jump back out of that graphic, but just wanted to bring that one up there too as we look at the midsection of the country. Now let's bring out our view and take a look at late next week. Back to warmth we go. Look at all of that in the midsection of the country. We're talking about way above normal weather here. And, you know, a pattern like that, like let's stop here for a second. That's Saturday, October 25th. So that's not this weekend, obviously, but next weekend. Let me center this up here a little bit for you across the midsection of the country. If you get a pattern like that, you're gonna still get 70-degree weather. I feel very confident that that would be at least 20 degrees above normal. And so that's on the table. Does it make sense? Absolutely, given the fact that we're forecasting that low to come out of the Intermountain West by the last, 3 days of the month of October? Take a look at that. Isn't that an interesting map? You've got Monday, the 27th of October. You run all that warmth ahead of that big low. Look at the cooling there near Denver. Interesting to see that. That's, again, painting a picture of that closed low. And, you know, it drags in some cooler weather maybe on the tail end of that. So that's where the AI version of the European model sits. I'm really curious to see what it does for precipitation. And this is interesting. Look at that. This is the brand new run of the model. This is, again, the 27th and the 28th of October. And it runs most of that rain south of us, doesn't it? And that's what the other version that we showed a little earlier in the broadcast had as well. So it's not a shoo-in that we're going to get a lot of rain out of this. In our particular region, this could change. We've got a lot of time. We can keep an eye on that. But that's how the month of October is likely going to close out. And just for fun, since I know we got to get to snow, your favorite subject, right? Well, there's the snow forecast through the end of October. And it does hit Yellowstone. You got your Rockies there west of Denver, Colorado Springs picking up snow. And then that goes all the way up into the Pacific Northwest. Actually, there's a little bit of snow right there in northern Minnesota, too. That's about the 30th of October. Not a surprise. It can snow anytime it wants now. And as we talk about the extended forecast on these programs, this is a graphical version of sometimes what Scott uses as a map or a graph that shows the individual ensembles or the little lines on the screen. This is just another way that we can look at that. So instead of looking at one point, we're looking at the whole country and looking at North America. And this takes us out. This is the control run of the European model. So nothing there that's of major precedence for us. Maybe it does paint out a little snow, but honestly, this latest run's kind of weak. That doesn't really get anybody too charged up about any big snow around here. But again, it's one model run. You got to remember that. That's a product that changes a lot. If we go to this product, this one will actually be the average, okay? And we'll run this in 7-day increments. So let's go backwards in time. We'll run this out You can see your rocky snow. That's into the first week of November. And then it kind of just paints those subtle blue colors and the grays here, doesn't it? So we try to pick this apart a little bit to find some clues about early winter weather. But today's latest run is not all that impressive yet. And so I always like to go back to what Scott would say if he were here, that it's an all or nothing month. And it does tend to be that way. So if we don't really have a major shakeup of any major storms, which, by the way, that thing in October, if we get that system at the end of the month, that's a cutoff low, but you're not surging any Arctic air with any of this. The polar component, if you really want to look at that, we've got some really neat maps on this. I never get to these on television much, but see this one here? This goes all the way up to the North Pole. So let's plot this. Our temperature graphic, when we look at the temperature anomalies, well, what's going on over the polar regions? Well, it is warmer than average, and the modeling is not really kicking anything off here, is it? It's not really bullying any big changes to the forecast yet. So if the pattern remains more zonal, we will end up being milder than normal. And this is another way to look at it. See the series of troughs and ridges across North America. There's some evidence of ridging next week. We just talked about that. If you wanted this forecast to get really cold, you'd have to see some pretty big troughing in the west, and you'd have to have something diving in here. It's just not there yet. So let's hang tight for now. I think that's probably the safe bet in the forecast. And then we can kind of, sit back and watch this next week, see what November is going to bring to us. But right now, I'll tell you, it's going to be a little while yet before we see any severe changes to the weather, anything that's substantially colder. So let's hope we can land on a nice note. The Pheasant opener, overall, pretty good. We've got the rain chance handled, the wind handled. We'll get into next week, and we've got some great weather at times. We'll keep in mind Monday's wind. Those issues can come up this time of year pretty easily. All right, well, we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us today. I promise Scott Mundt, he'll be back next week with me, and we'll visit the next time on Whether or Not. Have a great day.